You wake up knowing something happened. Somewhere behind your eyes, 30 seconds ago, there was a whole world, a conversation with someone, a place you've never been, maybe something that scared you or made you laugh so hard it woke you up. You reach for it the way you'd reach for a word on the tip of your tongue. In the time it takes to actually sit up in bed, it's gone. Not faded. Gone. You're left holding a feeling with no content, completely certain something happened, with almost no ability to tell anyone what. Here's what should actually bother you about that. It's not that dreams are hard to remember. It's that they disappear faster than almost anything else your brain ever produces. You can recall a boring conversation from 3 years ago better than you can recall a dream from 90 seconds ago. That's not normal forgetting. That's something else happening on purpose, and most people go their whole lives without ever finding out what. Sleep researchers estimate that people forget somewhere around 90% of a dream within just 5 minutes of waking up, and the vast majority of that is gone within the first minute. Not blurry, not partial, gone the way a page gets wiped clean before the ink even dries. For decades, the assumption was simple. Dreams are just too weird, too disconnected, too poorly encoded to stick. Your brain tries to save them and mostly fails. That explanation sounds reasonable. It's also, according to more recent research, almost exactly backwards. In 2019, researchers at Stanford and the Center for Neuroscience at SRI International published a study in the journal Science that changed the entire framing of this problem. Working with mice, they identified a specific cluster of neurons in the hypothalamus, called MCH neurons, that switch on specifically during REM sleep, the exact stage where dreaming happens. When the team activated these neurons directly, the animal's ability to retain new memories got dramatically worse. When they suppressed the same neurons, memory retention improved. The implication is striking. Your brain isn't failing to hold on to dreams. Something inside it appears to be actively erasing them on a nightly schedule as they happen. It's worth being honest that this was a mouse study, not a human one. Nobody has directly proven the identical mechanism exists in exactly this form in the human brain yet. But the human neurochemistry lines up closely enough with what researchers already knew that most sleep scientists now treat active, deliberate forgetting as the more likely explanation, rather than a side note. So why would a brain build a system specifically to delete its own experiences? The answer sits in basic chemistry. While you're awake, two neurotransmitters, norepinephrine and acetylcholine, work together to stamp new experiences into memory. They're part of the same system that lets you remember what you had for breakfast or where you parked. During REM sleep, acetylcholine stays high, which is part of why dreams can feel so vivid and immersive in the moment. But norepinephrine, the chemical most responsible for actually locking a memory in place, drops to close to zero. You are quite literally generating an experience using a memory system that's been deliberately powered down. It's less like a bad recording and more like performing an entire play with the archivist asleep at the desk. If that chemistry explanation is right, it predicts something specific, and it turns out to be true. The dreams you do remember clearly tend to be the frightening ones. Nightmares are disproportionately well recalled compared to ordinary dreams, and the likely reason fits perfectly with everything we just covered. Intense fear during a dream appears to trigger a genuine spike in arousal, and with it, a burst of exactly the neurotransmitter that's supposed to be shut off, norepinephrine, often strong enough to jolt you fully awake in the process. In other words, a nightmare doesn't just feel more memorable. It may be one of the only times all night your brain briefly turns its own memory recording system back on, purely because it registered something as urgent enough to be worth keeping. Which raises an obvious question. If the system is built to forget, why do we dream vividly at all, instead of just having a blank, dreamless night? One leading idea is that dreaming and forgetting aren't opposites. They're two outputs of the same process. Sleep researchers increasingly think REM sleep is when your brain works through emotional material, consolidates some memories, and clears out others, and the strange, vivid narrative you experience is closer to a side effect of that maintenance than the actual point of it. You're not watching a movie your brain made for you. You're catching a glimpse of your own memory system running its nightly cleanup. And dreams are what that process looks like from the inside, for the few seconds before it gets wiped along with everything else. Which brings up something you've probably noticed in your own life. Some people remember dreams constantly, and some almost never do. This isn't random, and it isn't really about better or worse memory in general. Perrine Ruby, a neuroscience researcher at the Lyon Neuroscience Research Center in France, has spent years scanning the brains of what researchers call high dream recallers and low dream recallers. Her findings show that people who remember dreams often have measurably higher activity in the temporoparietal junction and medial prefrontal cortex, regions tied to attention and awareness of the outside world. And, critically, they wake up briefly, many times a night, far more often than low recallers do, almost always without consciously noticing it. In one of her studies, high recallers reported remembering a dream roughly 5 times a week on average, compared to just once every 2 weeks for low recallers, a genuinely large gap for something most people assume is basically random luck. That detail matters more than it sounds like it should. According to what researchers call the arousal retrieval model, your sleeping brain genuinely cannot encode new memories while it's asleep. It needs a brief window of actual wakefulness to do that, even a window lasting only a few seconds that you'd never notice or recall afterward. High dream recallers appear to get more of those tiny windows throughout the night, which give their brain more chances to briefly catch and stamp down a fragment of whatever was happening in the dream at that exact moment. Low dream recallers may be dreaming just as much. They're simply sleeping through the only opportunity their brain gets to write any of it down. There's a further layer that research keeps circling back to. Dream recall frequency correlates with specific personality traits, openness to experience, creativity, and something researchers call thin cognitive boundaries, a tendency to blend and cross between categories of thought and feeling more fluidly than average. Nobody claims this makes one group better than the other. But it does suggest dream recall isn't just a quirky biological accident. It may be quietly tied to how your particular mind is wired to process the world even while you're wide awake. So here's what that means for you, specifically tomorrow morning. If you want to catch more of what's happening in your own head at night, the biology gives you an actual lever to pull. Those brief arousal windows are far more likely to convert into a real memory if you're consciously paying attention in the few seconds right after you wake. Before you move, before you check your phone, before norepinephrine comes flooding back online and shifts your brain fully into daytime mode. That 30-second window, when you first surface, isn't empty dead time. It's the only door your dream is ever going to walk through. And most people slam it shut by reaching for their phone before they've even opened their eyes. Here's the genuinely useful part researchers keep confirming. Dream recall isn't fixed. People who deliberately keep a dream journal, writing down anything at all the moment they wake, reliably increase how often they recall dreams within just a couple of weeks. The likely explanation lines up exactly with the arousal retrieval model. You're not improving your memory in some abstract sense. You're training yourself to actually notice and use those brief, seconds-long wake windows that were always happening anyway, instead of sleeping straight through the only chance your brain gets to write anything down. We like to think forgetting our dreams is a small failure, a slightly broken feature of an otherwise reliable memory system. The truth is closer to the opposite. Your brain isn't failing to hold on. Specific neurons, on a nightly schedule, are actively letting go, clearing space, running maintenance on a system that has to reset itself every single night in order to keep working the next day. The dream was never meant to last until morning. For one brief, chemical-starved window, while it was happening, it was real enough. That was always the whole job it had to do. Tomorrow morning, you'll wake up holding another one for a few seconds before it goes, and now, at least, you'll know exactly why.